Okay, welcome back. Today we're going through May-June 2021, question paper 12. So again, we start at the bottom. And again, any question which is exactly like May-June 2021, question paper 11, we just circle the correct answer. You can go to question paper 11, that video, for a full explanation. So question 30 is one of those. Question 29. What may result from a balance of payments trade surplus? Okay, so remember that a surplus, trade surplus, means that our exports are higher than our imports. Okay, and what happens when we have a trade surplus? So this question is rather unusual. It's not about what causes it, but rather what might happen because of it. Okay, so the thing that we need to know is that when we have a trade surplus, what it does is it will cause an appreciation of the currency. Okay, a deficit will cause a depreciation, but that's not what we're asked here. We're asked about what will cause a surplus. And then when we have an appreciation of the currency, what we need to remember is what happens when we have an appreciation. So when we have an appreciation, that means that the price of exports go up, so the total exports will go down, and the price of imports go down, so the total imports will go up. Okay, so therefore we just need to match it to what we know happens when we have an appreciation. So if we match it here, we see export prices to rise. So our correct answer will be B. When we have an appreciation of the currency, export prices don't fall. That's what happens when we have a depreciation, not an appreciation. So A can't be the correct answer. Correct answer will be B. And like I said, it's opposite effect for deficit. Deficit will cause a depreciation, where price of exports will go down, total exports will go up, price of imports will go up, and total imports will go down. Okay, question 28. Economies have become increasingly linked through globalization. What would discourage this? So globalization is the process where we're connecting more with other countries, etc. Right? And we're going to say, what would stop this happening? So the creation of a single world market, that's going to be wrong, because what that's essentially going to do is it's going to allow for free trade, right? And what we know about free trade is that free trade is actually going to increase globalization. If we can export and import freely between different countries, then that's going to increase our connections with those other countries. If we have more direct foreign investment by multinational companies, that's going to have the same effect, right? Remember, if we're looking for the negative about what will stop this from happening. If we have expansion of trade and financial services, that's the same thing. That's going to help us to export and import more, because we're told that the trade is expanding, so we'll be exporting more and importing more. But if we put protectionist policies by trading groups, what's that going to do? That's going to restrict imports, and through restricting imports we're stopping trade, so we are discouraging globalization from happening. Okay, so correct answer there is D. So 27. What is the most likely benefit for a low-income economy if it removes tariffs on imported goods? So remember that a tariff is tax, and this is coming back to our trade as well, right? If we get rid of taxes on imported goods and services, what's going to happen is that we're going to have more imports coming into the country, right? So will we be collecting more tax revenue? No. We'll be collecting less tax revenue. Why? because we've got rid of the taxes that we had on the imports, so we're not going to be collecting as much tax. Will it result in more exports by domestic firms? Possibly. So it could be a potential benefit, but it's also not the most likely one that we have here. When we if we remove tariffs, it's going to allow us to import more goods and services. So again, what is likely to happen is that we will therefore export less. Okay, or we'll export the same amounts, because we're now able to import more freely. More employment in declining industries, again, that's incorrect. That's not a benefit. Yeah. If we have more imports coming in, it's likely to result in, or it's possible that we may have more employment in industries that are declining, but they're probably declining for a reason, and that's because there may not be enough demand for those industries. What it will definitely do is it will result in more choice for domestic consumers. If we can import more, the domestic consumers are going to have the choice of either buying domestically from our own country's firms, and they may have the possibility of choosing the imports now also more freely because they're cheaper, so they'll get a greater choice of goods and services. Okay, question 26 to 21, they are all from question paper 11. So again, I'll circle the correct answer, and you can just go to that question paper, QP11, for the full explanation of these answers. So that's from 26 until 21. Okay, and question 20 then. So what is likely to happen when a country is experiencing deflation? Okay, so remember, what is deflation? Deflation is where the price level is going down, right? So it's the opposite of inflation. Everything in the country, the goods and services that we're buying on a daily basis, are becoming cheaper, not more expensive, which would be inflation. So what's going to happen? So, will the real value of money fall? No. The real value of money will actually increase because everything is becoming cheaper. So if we have 100 RMB, next year when we have deflation, that 100 RMB will actually be worth more money. Will the level of imports increase? Okay, so again, that's possible if AD had moved to the left, which would be our bad deflation, but it's also possible or unlikely because when the price level goes down, goods and services are becoming cheaper in our country. So we're more likely to buy domestically than we are to import from other countries because they're now cheaper for us to buy in our home market. And governments raise interest rates. Okay, that's unlikely because what that will do is, remember, that's contractionary monetary policy. That will move AD to the left, and that is not going to fix either type of deflation that we could possibly have. So remember, deflation could be bad or good. Good is where AS will move to the right, and bad is where AD will move to the left. So the way of fixing the bad deflation would actually be to decrease the interest rates, to use expansionary monetary policy, and to try and move AD back to the right. So the one that we're left with is that consumers will delay spending. Okay, and that's more than likely because as the price level goes down, they're losing confidence in the economy. And because aggregate demand may have moved to the left, that would indicate to us that consumers would be spending less, investment would be less, and exports minus imports would be less also, okay, because they're a component of aggregate demand. Okay, question 19. So this is one of these simple questions where we just need to read the table and calculate what's correct from the information that they've given us. So, what statement is correct? Consumer prices were highest in year 3. Okay, well that's wrong, because we can see here that in year 4 consumer prices are higher than they were in year 3. They're 102.1 in year 4, but only 101.8 in year 3. The rate of inflation was 2.1% in year 4. That's also wrong. We can see that the change between year 4 and year 3 is 0.3. So the rate of inflation would be 0.3%. That's the CPI for year 4 minus the CPI from year 3. The rate of inflation was highest in year 2. Okay, so we can see that actually that will be correct. Year 2 to year 1 it was 1.1%. Year 3 to year 2 it's 0.7, and we've already calculated that year 4 was 0.3. So the rate of inflation is actually the highest in year 2. And the rate of inflation was lowest in year 1, but we just talked about that. That's incorrect. It's the highest in year 1. But also, if it's year 1, we have to compare it to the previous year, and we don't have that information. So we don't actually know what the rate of inflation was against year 0, for example. Okay, a country is experiencing unemployment. It has a progressive income tax policy and benefits for the poor. The government aims to increase employment and reduce income inequality. Which fiscal policy measures are most likely to achieve these aims? Okay, so we want to increase employment and reduce income inequality. What are we going to try and do? We're going to try and be moving AD to the right. Okay, because we know that if we move AD to the right, our real GDP will increase, so our national income will go up, our employment will go up, and our living standards will go up, which may help us to reduce income inequality. Now we need to answer the question of how do we use fiscal policy to move AD to the right? We use expansionary fiscal policy, which is where we lower taxes and we increase government spending. Okay? So, what we're looking for here is where we're decreasing the tax rates, right? So we've got an option between A and C. Now, we're trying to reduce income inequality also. So if we decrease the highest rate of tax, what's that going to do? That's going to put more money in the pockets of the people who have the most money, because they're the highest earners. That's not going to help us reduce income inequality. What we should do is we should decrease the lowest rate of tax. So we should give people who are earning the least amount of money more money in their pockets, and then we can increase the benefits for the poor. So that would be government spending, remember. So we'd be using expansionary fiscal policy here by increasing government spending on spending with benefits for the poor and decreasing the lowest tax rate, which is also expansionary fiscal policy. And remember, that's because we're trying to reduce income inequality. So we want to give more money to poor people. We don't want to give more money to wealthy people or people who already have a lot of money. Okay, a government uses expansionary monetary policy. What does the government decrease? Okay, so we should all know this by now. Expansionary monetary policy is where, again, just like our expansionary fiscal, we're moving AD to the right. And the components of that are interest rate goes down. Okay, we have a depreciation of the currency. We have an increase in the money supply, and we have a decrease in the credit regulations, so we make it easier for people to borrow money. So what does the government decrease? So we can see here, do we decrease bank lending? No. We want to increase bank lending, and we do that through reducing the credit regulations. So reducing credit regulations makes it easier for people to have bank lending. We know that we can see here we do decrease the interest rate. If we decrease the budget deficit, remember that's government expenditure and government revenue, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be increasing our revenue and reducing our spending, which is not going to help us move AD to the right. It will actually help us move AD to the left. And we can see that we don't want to decrease the money supply, we want to increase the money supply to move AD to the right. So money supply is just the money that's circulating in an economy, and we want to have more money circulating for people to be spending more. Okay, question 16, I'm not going to spend too long on this because I've just gone through it on the last question. We can see fiscal policy measure is direct taxes, exchange rates is monetary policy, interest rates are monetary policy, you can see that in question 17, and regulation is a separate type of policy the government can use, like introducing minimum and maximum pricing. Okay, question 15. A private sector firm is the only supplier of rail services between two cities. What will stop the firm from charging very high prices? Okay, so the high cost of maintaining rail tracks is not going to stop them from charging high prices. More likely it will increase their prices because their costs of production would be higher. Government policy encouraging monopoly power, again, that's going to increase, or that's going to help them charge high prices if the government wants them to continue to be the only supplier or a monopoly. If there's barriers to entry into rail services, again, that is a characteristic of a monopoly market, and that will help them to charge higher prices because it means that they will face less competition, so they can charge whatever they want. But if they have competition from public road transport, that is likely to be a substitute for rail services. So it means that even though they're the only supplier, if they charge too high of a price, people will just go to use public transport instead of using their rail services. So they can't charge too high of a price, or people will just leave to use the other public road transport. Okay, 14 is also very simple. What is calculated when price is multiplied by quantity demanded of a product? That will be total revenue. Okay, our total cost is our variable cost, total variable cost, plus our total fixed cost. Okay, profit is not the same as revenue. Profit is our revenue minus our expenses, what we're left over with, and average revenue is the average price that we're selling the product for. So it's not everything. When we multiply price by the total amount that we sell, that's when we get our total revenue. Okay, question 13. Again, these are the merger questions, so you just need to go look at your slides and revision notes for these to find out the correct merger. Swedish furniture maker bought a Romanian firm that owned 83,000 hectares of trees. What type of merger is this? So this is likely to be vertical backward. There's an easy way to think about this. If you think about a straight line, here's where they're going to be selling the product, right? So at the end of the line. And at the start of the line is where they're going to be making the product, or where they're getting the raw materials, right? So this one is vertical backward because the firm that's going to be making or getting the raw materials is the Romanian firm that owned 83,000 hectares. So they're going to be in this section somewhere, right? And the furniture maker, they're going to be in the middle section because they're doing the manufacturing. So what they're doing is they're actually going back along their supply chain and they're taking over the Romanian firm with the hectares in order to be able to decrease their cost of production, because they no longer have to buy it from them, they own the company themselves, which means that they can pass it on to the seller to sell at a cheaper price. Okay, which cost of production falls continuously as output increases? So this is fairly simple. The correct answer here will be our average fixed cost. Remember that our fixed costs are set. So our fixed cost could be, let's say, 20,000. Let's say it's 20,000 when we have 0 units of output. Okay? As we start to produce more output, this 20,000 is not going to change. But in order to calculate our average fixed cost, we'll have to divide our units of output by 20,000. So if we're making 100 units of output, okay, we divide 20,000 into 100, and then what will we get? We should get 200 would be our average fixed cost. And that will continue to go down because the units of output will continue to get higher and we'll continue to divide it by the same number. Whereas our average total cost could still increase because of our variable costs. Our variable costs could get higher as our output goes up, and therefore our total variable cost would be the same. That could increase due to our variable costs increasing also. But fixed cost will stay the same. Variable cost will change, so it may actually increase as output increases, but fixed cost will always go down as we start to produce more. Okay, question 11. The diagram shows a market for labour. X is the original equilibrium. A trade union negotiates a minimum wage at W, and the government restricts the supply of immigrant labour. What is the new equilibrium? Okay, this is quite a unique question. I think it's a very good question actually. It looks difficult, but it's actually not that difficult, right? X is where we are, and then we have an introduction of a minimum wage, which we can see would create some unemployment here. But the government, we're told, has restricted the supply of immigrant labour. So what's that going to do? That's going to shift the supply curve to the left because we're going to have less people working, right? So we can see here that our supply curve is shifted, and when it's shifted to the left, where do we end up? We end up at B. So B will actually be our new equilibrium, right? And that means that our wage rate, our national minimum wage, will now actually be below the equilibrium, because when we have less labour available, the price of that labour will increase because it becomes harder to find labour to do the jobs. Okay, question 10. What would be a disadvantage of specialization for a worker? So let's remember what specialization is first. Specialization is where basically we're focusing on what we are good at making, right? So we are better at making a particular good and service than another country or another firm, for example, and we can make it using our resources more efficiently than other firms or other countries can. Okay, now worker specialization is where they're going to focus on doing one thing, and they're going to get really good at that one thing. So what does that mean? That means that they may become bored due to doing the same thing over and over again. Having a higher quality of good is not a disadvantage, that's an advantage. Having a low price of the product they make is not a disadvantage, it's an advantage. And having the opportunity to undertake training and improve their skills is again not a disadvantage, it's an advantage. So that one should be fairly clear. Boredom due to repetition of the task is the only disadvantage they may face for specializing. Okay, what might cause consumers in a high income economy to both save more and spend more? Okay, an increase in the interest rate. So we're looking at these and we're assuming that nothing else has changed, right? An increase in the interest rate, that's going to result in them saving more but spending less, because they get more money for keeping their funds in a bank account, right? Therefore, they'll start to put more money into the bank accounts, but they'll start to spend less because more of their money is going into savings. If inflation rises at a faster rate than wages, okay, that will result in them possibly spending more because the price of goods and services will get higher, but they won't be able to save more because the real value of their wages will be going down. We're saying here that inflation is higher than the salary increases they're getting. So if you get a salary increase of 2%, but inflation is 3%, you're actually losing 1% every year. And if you're losing 1%, it becomes harder to save more money because you've now got less money available. Okay, if they expect that prices will fall in the future, they're going to spend less money, aren't they? Because they're expecting that things will become cheaper in the future. So expectation that prices will fall in the future may enable them to save more, but to actually spend less, because they think that the prices will come down in the future, so they're not going to spend now. They're going to wait until the future comes and spend when the prices drop. But if they have an increase in wealth, they will be able to save more money because they have more money, and they will be able to spend more money because they have more money also. So remember, wealth is like not just their salary or their wages, it's the value of all their assets. And the richer people become, the more money they save and the more they can spend compared to when they were poor. Okay, question 8 is from question paper 11 again, so just go to that paper for full explanation. Question 7. The diagram shows the market for information technology students. The original equilibrium was X. Later, more students graduated from university, and greater use of AI increased the demand for IT staff. So we start at X, right? Now we're thinking about this is the market for labor. So if we have more students graduating from university, that means that we're going to have a shift to the right in supply, right? Because we're going to have more labor that's available. So we're going to move from X onto this point first. And then we're told greater use of AI increased the demand for IT staff, so that should be straightforward. That means that our demand is then going to shift to the right. So we'll be left at a new equilibrium of point C. Okay. Okay, which problem will be reduced by a government subsidy to a firm? The absence of a public good. Okay, that's not going to be our answer. Subsidies or indirect taxes do not help to provide a public good. Government has to provide them themselves, and we call that direct provision, DP, right? They have to directly provide them because private firms will not provide them due to the public goods not being able to make a profit. And that's the only thing that the private firms are interested in, is making a profit. It will also not help to reduce the abuse of monopoly power. It will actually help to increase the abuse of monopoly power, because it would be providing free money to a firm which will allow them to make more and sell at a lower price. Now, will it affect the overconsumption of a demerit? No, it's going to increase the consumption of a demerit if we give a subsidy. Remember, the way to fix the overconsumption is that we have to reduce the supply. So we have to use an indirect tax to shift supply left. But it will help us to reduce the underconsumption of a merit good. They're goods that people will benefit from using. So we want to increase the supply, and when we put a subsidy in place, supply will shift to the right and the quantity will increase, which is exactly what we want with a merit good. Okay, question 5. This is very simple. What determines a consumer's demand for a product? So look over your factors that affect demand, slides and revision notes, unit 2. Consumer's income, yes. Willingness to buy, yes, that's the definition of demand. And of course the price will impact them also. So the only one which has all three is A. Okay, their income does matter. The higher their income, the more they buy. Their willingness to buy, of course, matters because they won't buy if they're not willing to. And the price of the product determines how much they will buy. So when price goes up, the demand will go down, and when price goes down, the demand will go up. So of course it does affect the demand for a product. Okay, what is not included in microeconomics? So basically they're saying here what is included in macro. Remember, micro is the study and behaviour of individuals, firms, households and individual markets. Economies and scale is microeconomics because it's looking at how a firm, so one firm or one industry, can decrease their average costs as they grow. The forms of competition is a microeconomic concept. Competitive markets and monopoly markets, again, we're only looking at one industry in particular, not the whole economy. Individual demand is also a micro concept. It's looking at the behavior of households or individuals, not the whole economy. But the inflation rate is a macro concept because it affects everybody. It affects the whole economy when we have an increase in inflation. Okay, question 3. A farmer sells land used for crops to a firm that will use the land for wind turbines to produce electric power. What is the opportunity cost of this decision? So remember, we're looking for what they've given up. So in this case, they're using it for wind turbines, so they've given up using it for crops. Okay, therefore the loss of revenue from crops that grow on the land would be what they're missing out on. The cost of installing the wind turbines is not an opportunity cost, that's the decision that's been made to use the land for wind turbines. The profit made from selling the land is not an opportunity cost either, because that's not what they're missing out on, that's what they've received. And the reduced cost of producing renewable energy again has no effect, because that's a consequence of the decision that's been made, not what they're missing out on from making that decision. Okay, question 2. A multinational company wishes to invest in a low-income country to expand its palm oil production. What is most likely to make this investment possible? Okay, so we want the MNC to expand their palm oil production, and what's going to help us to allow them to do this? If there's a high cost of clearing forests to increase land for plantations, that's not going to help us, is it? That's going to be something that will stop us or make the investment less possible because it's going to be very expensive. If we remove subsidies for palm oil production, that's also not going to help us. Removing subsidies is a bad thing, remember, when we're trying to increase production of something, because it's going to increase their costs. If there's a shortage of labour in the rural economy, that's also not going to help us. It's going to be hard for this MNC to find the workers in order to expand their production. But if there is an increased demand for palm oil, well then that will help us to make the investment possible, because there's going to be a demand for them to expand their production. So they know that if they make more, they will be able to sell more because the demand is higher. Okay, and question 1. What is an advantage of competitive markets? Okay, so remember, competitive markets, what do? They create choice, they create higher quality products, that is, and they create lower prices. Okay, so now let's look at A to D. So the right quantity of merit goods is guaranteed, that's not true. merit goods may still be under-consumed. Economic problem scarcity is eliminated. Again, that's definitely not true. Okay, we can't eliminate the problem of scarcity. It's something that exists. Competition causes inequalities of wealth. That is true, but it's not an advantage of the market. So the competition encourages us to use the resources efficiently. That is an advantage. We're able to get higher quality and lower prices because we are very efficient, right? Competition means that if we're not efficient, our firm or our company is not going to survive. So we have to become more efficient in order to survive in the marketplace. Okay, so that's another advantage of the competitive markets. Okay, thanks for listening.